Hey everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of my mom's favorite podcast on IBM's YouTube channel, the Gregg and Joe Turbo Show. I'm your host, Joe, joined as always by the man who has a new hoodie for every day of the week, Mr. Gregg Minicello. Hey, Gregg, how's it going?
Hi, Joe's mom.
Hey, Mom, how's it going? Today we're really lucky, and we say this all the time, but this is true. Actually, this is a gentleman that I met a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. Works at Aptio, kind of a big brain over there, if you will. But we're really lucky to kind of have him on. Adam, oh man, Biegeleisen, nailed it.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. Adam, thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to chat with you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here, Joe. And Mrs. Sforza, nice to meet you as well.
Thank you. Everyone say hi to my mom. But no, honestly, we've kind of through these episodes, we've kind of danced around some of the Aptio topics. We've kind of talked about them briefly, but we've never really had someone who's really a product expert. And so having you on is fantastic because hopefully we can kind of dive into, what these platforms are, what value they deliver, and so on. And so again, thank you. But before we get into that, maybe we can start with who's Adam? Who are you? Tell us.
Yeah, who is this guy?
Who is this guy?
My name's Adam Biegeleisen, and I've been with Aptio for a little over 12 years at this point. My career background really entirely from the analytics side. So I kind of got started on the BI side when BI was a still relatively new thing. About 12 years ago or so, made my way over to Aptio. I was really excited about the ability to kind of take that BI platform background and apply it to like a legitimate set of defined business problems to actually do something specific with it. I always thought that was a really interesting and powerful value proposition. And I've been a solutions consultant here for that time. For the first half of my tenure year, I focused on both kind of equal weighted on the commercial and the public sector sides of the house. And in the back half here, I focused much more, not almost exclusively, pretty focused on the pub sec side in particular. So I spend a lot of my time these days with federal prospecting customers, as well as state and local government, and even some education prospects and customers as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. So I mean, you've been there since the beginning. Essentially, it sounds like, and seen a lot, which is great.
Yeah, for sure.
What was the beginning of Aptio? When was the company founded?
So I mean, I'm definitely, so to be fair, I'm not from the beginning. There were years before Biegeleisen at Aptio, believe it or not.
Did they call those BE? That's yeah.
They might, B. I don't know.
Yeah. Before Biegeleisen, whatever.
It's definitely centered around me. That's all I know. But yeah, Aptio was formed around 2008 or so, plus or minus a year, depending on who's telling the story. But the idea at that time was really that our CEO at the time and founder of Aptio, Sunny Gupta, had really just come off of some other business endeavors, and he had a super comprehensive Rolodex of IT leaders, and he really just wanted to kind of figure out what is the next big problem that he could help solve. And Aptio was really born out of dozens of conversations that he had with CIOs and CFOs of IT. When CFO of IT was actually kind of still a new idea. And that's kind of where Aptio came from. And it was born right around the time of the Great Recession, when financials became more important than ever and technology was exploding and people needed to wrap their arms around this. And it was kind of universally identified that nobody had a system to help people really figure out and control where is the money going, how does it tie to all of this technology stuff that's constantly growing and changing. So we really kind of, from a company perspective, formed a pretty clear mission statement out of that. So that was, again, back in 2008 or so. I joined in 2012. So, 4 years later, I was coming on, and it was an exciting time. And we've gone out and we've helped a lot of customers since then.
So was that, I guess, at that time, because I guess today, and this is for folks who don't know, I mean, Aptio now is really more of sort of like a brand or an umbrella, if you will, that sort of encompasses a few different platforms today. But in the beginning, was Apptio 1 the first platform for Aptio? Is that like how it started, and then other things kind of were added later? Or I guess when you first started in 2012, what did the product do? What was it called?
Yeah. So Aptio was really born on this idea of TBM, or technology business management. So ITFM was somewhat of a new and a big growing thing back in the, around in the years leading up to Aptio's founding. But this notion of technology business management, this was really kind of a new category that Aptio created. And it kind of takes that notion of ITFM, which is really focused on the financials, but it overlays that and brings into context all of the operational side as well. So TBM and what has today really become the Aptio One platform is really where Aptio got started. So for any listeners out there, Mrs. Sforza, like yourself, you've heard about Aptio, and maybe you've heard about the different areas that Aptio plays in, but TBM, Technology Business Management, Aptio One, that's really what we made our name on. And then what we've done along the way is based on kind of technology trends and challenges and kind of the emergence and the explosion of the cloud in particular, and other kind of complementary disciplines. What happened, what kind of grew naturally out of TBM was an initial focus within our our core TBM platform around cloud analytics. And what also happened is kind of an explosion of other cloud related solutioning offerings that started to become available in the marketplace. And so, whereas Aptio's growth through TBM was really always very organic, we started to shift toward a little bit more of an acquisition-centric growth approach in the years following when I joined in 2012. And one of those major acquisitions was of this other technology solution called Cloudability. That was probably, gosh, I don't know, maybe 2017, 2018, plus or minus a year at this point. But so what we did is we basically brought on this parallel platform that really drove a very similar TBM and ITFM type outcomes, but which was purpose built for the unique complexities and opportunities of doing that in the cloud environment. And so FinOps became kind of the analog to TBM that focused specifically on that cloud-oriented TBM, if you will. So we kind of started from TBM. We grew and extended that reach into a set of purpose-built cloud and FinOps specific capabilities. And then even more recently, over the last 3 years or so, we made another major acquisition of a technology called Target Process. And Target Process is really kind of the third leg of the triad of solution areas that Aptio focuses on today. So we talked a little bit about TBM, we talked about FinOps and the cloud, and this last piece is really around agile and portfolio management and planning, enterprise agile management and planning technically, and something that we're talking a lot more now uses the terminology labor financial planning. So it kind of extends on capabilities that have been inherent in TBM for a long time. But what it does is give more granular capability to the actual people on the ground who are responsible for managing the complexity of who's going to be working on what. How are we going to manage all of these work streams where priorities are constantly changing and budgets are being moved back and forth? And how do we actually manage those resources? How do we keep track of what money's going where? And how do we always keep constant and tight alignment between how all of that spend and activity actually translates to a value-based portfolio perspective that executives and business stakeholders can understand? So that was a whole lot of talking, but that's kind of a little bit around the history of the of kind of the growth and the maturity of the company and the offerings that we've focused on.
So is it safe to think about it? Because I mean, again, coming in from being sort of a legacy Turbonomic person, when I think of Aptio, or when I initially thought of Aptio, I thought of Cloudability, because I guess that's just kind of where we both played the most,
right?
Where we would meet each other on the battlefield, so to speak.
Sure.
Now we're all one big family. We're all good now. Yeah, it's no problems here, but
Yeah, it's just like at Thanksgiving. One
exactly.
big happy family, everyone gets along, and
Everyone's getting along great. You know what I mean?
that's right.
But is it safe to say then that Apptio one is really focused on sort of the total cost of IT, and whereas cloudability is just as the name implies, and as you kind of just described, is really sort of zoned in, completely focused on cost of operating in the cloud, and that's it.
You got it. You got it. Yeah. So cloudability and FinOps really focuses specifically on that cloud landscape. So, from a technology perspective, cloudability is optimized for a known set of data structures, right? AWS, Azure, GCP, OCI bills, they all look the same for everyone, no matter how different customers are using those cloud resources. And so the Cloudability platform focuses specifically on rapid ingest of these known data structures and a whole bunch of capabilities on top of that that really help drive the most from an analytics and an optimization perspective on top of that. The TBM challenge, exactly as you mentioned, Joe, focuses on that entire technology landscape. That's not just the known data structure. It's not just the known data structures of the cloud environment, but also all of these other potential areas that can be really challenging without a purpose-built solution to bring together. So you think about what kind of data we want to be able to bring together to really provide that same kind of set of rich analytics across the broader technology landscape. We need to start bringing, there is no nice, neat cloud bill that does that for all technology everywhere, right?
Oh, they're super easy to read. What are you talking about? So one page, they're very clear. Yeah, of course.
Right. I mean, cloud bills themselves are fun on their own, but you move outside of the cloud, and now where's financials coming from? Well, there's no bill that kind of specifies that. There's a general ledger, there's a financial system that's written that spells all of this detail out in finance categories, budget codes, and a chart of accounts and cost centers. But that's not very friendly to folks on the IT or technology side who are trying to make sense of that. So you have your general ledgers, you have your spend plans or budgets, which are often built in different systems at different levels. You have the idea of wanting to understand not just what's the dollars and what's our variance to plan, although that in itself can be very powerful to have in an automated ongoing basis. But how do these things start to align to categories that have meaning to technology decisions we're trying to make? How does our spend relate to the things we deliver? The applications, the services, the products, the capabilities, the solutions, right? Choose your, kind of service delivery model. We have our ITSM tools, our ServiceNows and our BMCs. We have our virtualization platforms, our data center. We have our service desk activities. So there's a lot of different systems that IT is using all over the place to track and manage different parts of the operation. And then, off over here, we have our financial data. But how do you bring all this stuff together so that we can actually understand total cost of ownership, how that spend translates to all of these other things we need to understand to manage our portfolio of solutions, to manage our resources, to understand where we're spending more or less than we had planned to, and what are we getting for it. So that's kind of the unique set of capabilities that the Heritage Aptio platform was built for. It was built to specifically drive automation of the ingest of all of these different kinds of data, wherever they happen to be, and to enable and to also automate the normalization, the transformation, the enrichment of this data to help it play together between all these different data types and systems that were never built to play together before.
And drive accountability ultimately, right, across the organization. I imagine the 10 plus years that you've been doing this, you've probably seen some pretty wild stuff when people, customers have maybe thought everything looks good, sure, whatever, plug this in, do whatever. And then when they get the results, it's got to be shocking. Like, oh my God, I didn't realize, this much money is going to this, or there's this much that we had no idea we were even spending on this. Like, what's going on? I mean, is that a pretty common sort of situation to find yourself in when you're first engaging with folks?
Absolutely, especially back in the older days when the solution was so new and it was so different from anything that anyone had ever seen or heard of or been aware of before. I know that you have millions, if not hundreds of millions of viewers and listeners at this point, Joe. So I don't want to
Obviously. Yes.
dredge up too many specific skeletons by name, but there were definitely some pretty crazy engagements that we'd been on from kind of a pre-sales perspective and proving out the capability, where folks with complex and comprehensive, even compliance, kind of shackles that they were forced to wear, were really impressed with, and kind of shocked and blown away by how we could take some of these massive feeds from their complex Hyperion systems, their inventory systems, their asset management systems, and translate all this in an automated manner into a set of views that they could actually use as a showback or chargeback to their customers to say, hey, here's your fair share. Here's exactly what you're getting for it. Here's what your rates are, by the way. And rather than continuing to kind of say, hey, why are you so expensive? Why are you charging us more than you said you were going to at the beginning of the year? We have the ability for them to see on that same screen, here's what you actually consumed. And here was what you would plan to consume. Here was what the agreed plan was, right? So this is the rate, this is your cost, this is what you're getting for it. And if it's different than what you expected, here's why. Now, with all of this information in front of you, instead of fighting over what's the cost and why is it the cost, let's talk about if you're getting the right level of service for what you're paying. And if not, what are the levers that we can pull to make sure that we're either increasing that value or we're decreasing your consumption for stuff that you don't need to make sure that we stay within financial targets. So there's definitely been a lot of that. The one other thing I'll say is there are a lot of other cases where the specific dollars and cents, in fact, I would say this is the majority. I would say this is the majority of cases. The specific dollars and cents and the kind of the automagical insight machine is not necessarily always the most important thing, believe it or not. One of the biggest value drivers that we really provide with the set of capabilities I've talked about is we provide a much more meaningful baseline for all of the different stakeholders and people who care about money in technology spend for one reason or another to be able to come together and actually have meaningful conversations. So step one is getting out of that challenge around, I don't know how am I supposed to translate this chart of accounts and cost center breakout to what we're spending on what applications and how that ties to our strategic priorities. So automating through those technical challenges help everyone to start to understand. Our application and our solution owners understand this is what my fully burdened cost of ownership is. Here are the cost drivers. I actually have an ability now to understand why my spend is what it is and why I'm over or under budget to the extent that I am. It puts me in a much more powerful position to plan more accurately moving forward. We have our finance folks who need to do the same things and manage variance, but in their own kind of lexicon. We have our executives who want to understand, what are we spending? What are my customers getting for it? Who's my biggest customer? Are we spending the most on the most strategically important areas to our company or our organization? And so on and so forth. So there are a lot of different kinds of stakeholders who need to understand all this very differently. Aptio helps drive that understanding across all these disparate groups.
Is it fair to say though that the TBM model is sort of the Rosetta Stone, if you will, like this idea of cost pools and IT towers and things like that? That is sort of to what you're kind of talking about here, sort of bridging the gap and being able to bring teams together, but still make it accessible if you're a finance person or you're an operations person. Is that the sort of the piece in the middle there that makes this work?
That's a huge part of it, Joe, especially when we released that Rosetta Stone about 10 years ago or so. It drove, but before that, everybody's taxonomy and lexicon had bits and pieces of similarity, but nobody's was the same. There was no standardized way to do it. There was no best practices. So when Aptio and the nonprofit organization, the TBM Council, that kind of outgrew from that grew out from what started as a set of Aptio users, really defined a set of best practices and principles around that taxonomy and around all of these other things about how to do TBM. So that's a big part of it. Just taking away the mystery of what are the categories we should even be measuring by, first of all, and second of all, how are we supposed to take our financials and effectively distribute them across those categories. So yeah, that's a big piece of it. The other nice thing that enables is by getting the world, and this has really been adopted globally at this point for a long time now. In fact, it was even adopted by the federal government 5 or so years ago, which was which was a big accomplishment, of course. The idea is that that by establishing this set of categories, folks have the ability to understand how they're tracking against their industry peers, right? So it enables a whole level of benchmarking that would have been very challenging without a set of standards. So yeah, the TBM taxonomy and that Rosetta Stone is a big part of what makes this work and what makes it work. What kind of puts us in a position to advise from a best practice perspective.
Adam, I wonder, I way back when I was a wee lad at my former employer, I had much less of this white that you see today.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah. Side note, the guy I worked with used to say, "This is not white, this is silver. For every one, I become more valuable."
Mm-hmm. I like it. That's the best way I've heard it described.
Yeah. So you can take that. When I used to have these conversations with my director about costs, about finances, about, here's where we need to cut, here's where we can invest, here's where we can grow. He would always beat into my head that there's really only 3 areas in IT where you have cost, and those levers that you were talking about before. And I want to get your opinion on this. Maybe this is right at a high level, maybe it's not. And I'd like you to weigh in on it. You would say you got software, hardware, and people. What are your thoughts on those 3? Is that legitimate? Was he right about that, or are there other areas, or would those other areas just be splitting hairs?
Those are 3 of the core areas that the TBM taxonomy defines them by. So you're talking about breakouts that exist at what we call the cost pool layer. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of your first layer above your base financial layer. Financial layer is everything you get out of your financial systems, your chart of accounts and your cost centers. When you want to start to aggregate those into a set of more common categories, you get hardware, software, you get internal and external labor, which we make a distinction for so that folks can make better decisions around understanding what's our best staffing model. But then you also have outside services, so vendors and contracts. You have power, facilities, telecom. Those are the bulk of them. And then there's kind of a catch-all other bucket, but that gets you through your cost pools there. Yeah.
Yeah,
there's always something. There's always going to be something else. So,
and you got to start to panic when the other bucket is fuller than all the other ones. I feel like we skipped a step here, guys. We should probably start over. Let's
a little bit of hardware, a little bit of software, 98% other. We probably want to go back and look at that a little bit more.
No problem. Another question though. So with Apptio 1, it includes the concept of labor as sort of a metric that you can track and benchmark against and forecast and budget for. So, and we don't have to go super deep on this. I'm just curious, how does it differentiate from what target process, what target process is doing? And is it just like a more sort of deeper dive into specifically the cost of labor, or is it doing something completely different? And do they connect? I guess, is there a way in which Apptio 1 pulls data from something like a target process, or are they completely separate?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So target process and labor costing, if you will, within kind of the Apptio 1 universe are definitely very complementary. So labor analysis in Apptio 1 is going to focus on things like, how do my underlying costs tie to my various labor resources? What are the rates that I'm paying for various resources on various projects or out of various locations? How does that differ from my internal staff versus my external kind of T&M based staff? And what kind of insights can we gain from that? How can that help us kind of build high level budgeting and planning resource plans on kind of the annual type cadence? Target process kind of starts to get to the next level or the next several levels of depth in terms of specific capability it provides, not just from a kind of core, relatively, higher level financial and resource count perspective, but we actually start looking at what are all those individual developers and people doing? What is the specific amount of time they plan to spend on what activities? How does this tie to parallel work streams that are happening? How do each of those work streams tie to specific deliverables? And what do those deliverables mean from a business value perspective? So there are a lot of people, resource managers in particular, who this is a big constant challenge for. And so Target Process really helps a lot of those tactical resource manager type people use the tools to build those plans, to constantly update those plans, to allocate costs accordingly, and for this automated translation of all of that actual activity management to roll up in similar fashion to what we see at the higher level on the TBM side. And then the TBM or Apptio One side has the ability to take all of that additional kind of context that's created and maintained in Target Process and make that available as part of the broader TBM dashboard view with the ability to kind of drill into those financial numbers and understand all of that in much more depth. So there's a lot more kind of tactical capability for people responsible for managing that. And there's obviously tight integration with the broader TBM analytic platform.
So is there like, I'm just thinking out loud here. Like if you've gotten Target Process, you've put together and you said, I've got this deliverable associated with this initiative, project, whatever it is, and we're expecting a return of X% from this deliverable or this project. Is that comprehended as part of like the overall plan when you pull that information over to like, what'd you say, TBM? I assume there's got to be some kind of like, it pulls that information in and now you can see like, of all my costs, this one's got a pretty high cost, but the return associated with that group or that initiative or that project is also high. So I can see that and I can understand it and I can say, okay, cool, we should keep in that direction. This is going where we want it to be.
Absolutely. And so a big part there, and there's a couple of different ways that wants to happen and times at which that wants to happen, right? So when we're actually building the plans and when we're getting and managing all of the incoming requests for investments or new projects or whatnot, we need to understand that potential, that prioritization and that potential benefit, set of benefits when we're making the decisions about what are we actually going to fund. So we provide the analytics for you to actually build those plans and then understand, hey, according to the plan that we've laid out and the ROI metrics that we're saying we can expect by doing the work, what is our trade-off across all of these different requests coming in, and how am I going to use that information to balance what makes it above the line and what falls below the line. Really important, really useful for our financial planners and our resource planners to have this information to make those best decisions they can up front, minimize the number of changes that we're going to have to make for what are otherwise predictable reasons. And then, of course, there's the tracking on an ongoing basis as to, on the one hand, are we actually spending according to plan? Are we moving at the timeline that we had intended to? And if not, what's the additional cost? How far ahead or behind are we? What kind of trade-offs might we need to make to deal with that? And specifically, and especially once those projects and that execution starts to get done, let's go ahead and track the return as well. So if that's a revenue metric for customer, for public-facing applications and things like that, then let's go ahead and track that revenue as well and understand what kind of revenue has been generated for cost. And if it's a public sector organization where revenue isn't the key metric, but it's critical to understand things like uptime or customer satisfaction or risk, let's go ahead and track those metrics and how they've improved or not improved for this work that we've done as well.
Yeah, let's not wait till the project's over to realize we missed on all of our targets here, right? Let's honestly, right? Like let's leverage our own data to help us make better decisions throughout that process and adjust when needed. And you can really only do that with good data. And it seems like that's kind of what this is providing, is kind of giving you back your data in a way that becomes very powerful and useful.
That's right. And the entire Agile framework was developed specifically to enable that, right? So that we can fail fast, we can move on fast, we can understand and track these things. And that's been a really useful operational methodology for kind of revolutionizing the way development and work is done, where those practices are in place. but it still leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the constant translation of all of that to financials and value. And so that's a big place where target process fills those gaps.
I imagine some of this somewhere in any of these products would greatly assist in some kind of an app rationalization program, right? Where I say, I've got 100 applications in my portfolio. This is my business. This is where my revenue comes from. 10 of these haven't been hit by more than one user with $10 of revenue coming in, but out the door is pouring all this money to host and maintain and develop. What kind of a view do you get into that? And do customers use these products, and how do they use which products to do an app rationalization?
Yeah, great question, Greg. That's a tremendous use case and opportunity for Apptio customers. I would say it's probably one of the highest value opportunities that our customers realize. And the reason for that, as you can imagine, is it's really hard to get those numbers and do that analysis without a purpose-built solution. But when you take this ability to kind of grab all of the data that you need to represent different aspects of the application, to automate the alignment of that to cost coming from our financial systems of record, it gives us some really powerful views into understanding, okay, for all of these applications, what does it really totally fully burdened cost me to deliver each of these? Is it what I think it is? Is it much higher or lower? And, when we look at a portfolio of dozens or hundreds or many hundreds of applications, if we have a portfolio of 300 applications, are they really 300 distinctly different sets of capability? Or do we probably have a whole bunch of applications doing a similar thing? Do we have a whole bunch of communications applications, for example? And do we really need 30? And, what's our TCOs of each? What's our cost per user for each? What's it doing to our underlying resource usage and profile, right? And maybe we don't need 30. Maybe we should try to reduce it down to 28, right? Or maybe a few less.
Small bites.
Right, exactly. And we want to know what we can expect to get from it if we actually do it, because it's not a trivial effort in a lot of cases to shut stuff down, have those conversations, get the buy-in, and sometimes there are even costs associated with shutting things down. So, yeah, application rationalization is a big part. It's served really well by Apptio 1. But then there are pieces on the target process and and cloudability side that can really help with that too, especially if we're looking at migrating applications to the cloud, or if labor is a big component of support and keeping the lights on type activity is a big part of some applications costs, and we have an opportunity to significantly reduce that elsewhere.
What are some others, and just for the sellers that may be watching, because I know all of them do, and they all like and leave comments, so I appreciate it. But I guess, for a lot of the IBM sellers, Aptio is new, right? It's a new suite of products. And, so maybe they're not as sort of versed in having these conversations with customers. So what are some other type of like clear use cases or things that folks on the sales side can kind of listen for as hey, this is a great entry point for Apptio 1 or for cloudability or for whatever?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess from a high level, one of the first things we want to do is we want to understand what's the universe that they're playing in, right? So are the people that we're talking to, are the challenges that we're hearing about, are the outcomes that people are looking for? Are they really focused around challenges and opportunities in the cloud specifically? Are they around, and if they are, that's a cloudability. That's a likely cloudability solution play. If we're talking to finance folks or the CIO, Office of the CIO, CFO of IT, who are interested not just in cloud, but across, kind of getting better handles around financials, driving financial outcomes, doing rationalizations, those are much more kind of TBM or Apptio 1 type plays, ITFM plays. The other kind of set of themes to listen for with regard to a broader Apptio 1 TBM type of play is, there's often a lot of challenge around some of the. I talked earlier about this idea of how Apptio helps folks understand things and then better communicate. And by being able to better understand and communicate, we can partner better, we can collaborate better, we can take better actions together with less friction and more quickly for better outcomes. When you have an environment or you're talking to people where some of the challenges are just kind of the disconnect between finance, between budgets and plans, and between what IT is trying to do, between the demands that the business is placing on IT and that the IT may be struggling to justify or explain the value of what they're doing to their customers, right? Those are a lot of the kinds of themes that TBM and ITFM can be really helpful with, and that's the Apptio One play. I think from a target process side, I think it's a little more um, target process is a little more focused. So on the one hand, if you're talking to or working with a shop that is doing agile or trying to do agile or struggling with anything in the agile framework land and kind of understanding spend, um, management of those resources, alignment to value, that's a really clear target process opportunity. Target process is interesting though because its legacy is being a solution for that enterprise agile management and planning space, but it also really applies more broadly. So the value in target process isn't restricted to you, isn't restricted to folks only who are focused on an agile methodology. Most shops are hybrid, and they want a single place that they can manage resourcing and value alignment across any number of different methodologies. And that's why this notion of labor financial management as kind of a header for what target process does is something we've started to talk about to kind of broaden that out a little bit. But yeah, I hope that's helpful for some kind of initial guidance and pointers.
That is great. And I know, look, we can't obviously dive into each of the products in super detail today, because otherwise this would be a 12-hour podcast, and my mom would have fallen asleep a long time ago. And but I mean, I think this is great because I mean, ultimately, and feel free to say no, Adam. I don't want to put you on the spot, but we'd love to have you back on.
Yeah.
And maybe dive into the specific platforms and do a little bit more of a technical deep dive into them, because I know for myself I'm fascinated. I want to learn more about each of these, and I think clearly this is, especially with the cloudability stuff and the concept of FinOps, that is a very hot topic right now, one we've talked about a lot on this podcast. So I'd really love to kind of again, if you're open to it, come back and chat with us again, because I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, no, it'd be my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you guys today, and happy to come back and get into it some more.
I appreciate it. Gregg, anything from you?
We like to put everybody on the spot. So here we are. We're going to put you on the spot. What are you looking forward to? What's the most exciting thing that's up and coming? That it doesn't have to be about Aptio. It doesn't have to be about work. But if you want to keep it on topic, go ahead.
What's the most exciting thing that I'm looking forward to?
Yeah.
Well, I'll stay on topic for this one. Obviously, so IBM acquired Aptio last year, and there's all of the kind of gates and phases that we go through. As we are blue washed, right? That's the right term. So
right.
It's been interesting and it's been fun. But as one of the things that's really exciting and that I think is going to be really great for Aptio, IBM, and our customers is the fact that we've done some pretty great things from an Aptio only perspective, and the whole idea of having kind of this additional massive infusion of resources and investment to really kind of take what we've been able to do so far to interface and to kind of start to, what's the word I'm looking for, to integrate, that's it, with some of the really powerful middleware capabilities that IBM provides, as well as critically the AI capabilities that IBM Watson represents, is just, I think, going to be huge in terms of the kind of advancements that you're going to see from IBM Aptio in the coming quarters. So I think that's a really exciting opportunity for all of us. And just the idea of being able to get out there and help that many more organizations through all the scale that IBM's going to bring. So we're pretty excited about that.
Good answer. Good answer.
Yeah, very good answer. Absolutely. Good answer. Now you got me excited.
and summer vacation. Summer vacation will be fun too.
Of course.
Well, hey, again, Adam, really, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. We'll definitely have you on again. for at least 3 more episodes, right? I feel like we could get an episode out of each of the platforms. But for everyone watching, thank you for taking the time to watch. And obviously, you know, as always, if you have any questions or want some more great information, check out our IBM community pages. And other than that, thanks for watching, Mom, and see everyone on the next one.
Nice to meet you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
See you later.